What up, racer? ItsJerone here, and welcome back to another F1 2021 League Racing video. I hope you're all doing well, and today we are driving around the beautiful track, which is called Silverstone. I love driving this track, and regarding practice for this race, I've mostly been in time trial actually for once. My best hot lap will be up on my YouTube channel tomorrow. It's probably the best time trial I've done on this game so far. So go check that out if you want to see that tomorrow. Now, looking at the standings here in Apex Online Racing, you can see I got the win last time round in France, and it was a really fun race, to be honest. So, looking good in terms of the championship standings, 61 points ahead of Queeks. My teammate is not racing today, and in fact, quite a couple of drivers are not racing today. We're only with 15, I believe, and this was because it was, well, Easter weekend, so I can see why a couple of people signed out of the race. They probably had some family commitments, so that's not a problem. But we're still with 15, and that's a pretty reasonable amount of drivers to have for an F1 2021 League race. So we're going into the final part of qualifying now. You can see Pasti is on provisional pole right now, I think about 3/10 ahead of me actually, so quite a margin. And first sector was not really good, to be honest, because on my medium run, it was actually a really strong medium run I did, 27.0 I believe. Then on my first soft run I was basically equal on my time in sector 1, and this time only half a tenth quicker in sector 1, so this sector 1 was not really good, as we're now heading through Cops Corner, 8th gear. Hopefully it's completely flat, and I think I took it completely flat on this instance. Heading through Beckett and Chapel now, and you can see trying to take it in 6th gear, but we just run too deep, and I actually decided to back out here because I felt the time wouldn't have been enough to compete for pole position, so I just decided to back out and we'll go again. So we cool our tires a little bit, let a couple of cars go through, and as you can see, Pasti with a 26.432. That's his best time, so we need to find 3.5 tenths in this lap if we want to find pole position, or Pasti improves and we will need to find more. But we're starting our second lap on the set of tires. The race will start on full wets, by the way, so we don't have to worry about the tire wear on our tires in which we do our qualifying laps. So this time heading through sector 1, still not great, but it's definitely a lot better as we're now nearly 700ths up in the first sector. I think I touch a little bit of grass here heading into this sector, this part of the track. Heading through Lafayette now on the power as early as possible, little wiggle, not completely optimizing the track, but I think we found 200ths relative to our previous lap, so that's good. Cutting Cops really quite a lot here. I don't think that was the exact optimal line, but we're 2 tenths up, and let's see if we can do Beckett's right this time. This time I do decide to go down to 5th gear, but actually take a really tight line this time. But I guess that's still a lot better than running into the grass. So we're now 2.5 tenths up, heading into the final sector as we're heading through Stowe now. Didn't manage to keep it in 6th gear, had to go down to 5th. Then heading into Vale and trying to get the traction down. And we do find a lot of time relative to our delta, and in the end it's good enough for a 26.3 as Tash improves to P3 right behind me. And it is good enough for the pole position, so quite an okay lap. I did 2 quali sims, and both of my quali sims I was doing low 0.3s, so I guess it's quite okay, but there were still a couple of mistakes in the lap. But I'm quite happy. 0.1 could have been possible, but oh well, I think this is good enough. You'll see my time trial tomorrow, which was 25.9. That was a pretty crazy lap, to be honest. But let's focus on what we're doing today, and that's driving around a wet Silverstone. As you can see on the top, it will go to intermediate conditions and possibly to dry conditions towards the end of the race. Now, regarding the fuel, I was planning on doing 26.5 in dry conditions, and I thought, let's just take out 1 lap of fuel, considering it's wet conditions and you use a lot less fuel in wet conditions. I'm never really sure how much fuel to take out when going from dry conditions to wet conditions, so I was just guessing that this would be enough, but I also didn't want to risk too much, because, well, considering I still need to defend the championship lead I have, let's not take too many risks, as right at the end of the formation lap, when the AI takes over, I was making sure my tires on the right hand side were getting some temperature in, but basically when I was going full opposite lock to the left, the AI took over. So nice little spin ahead of the start, as we're now waiting for the 5 red lights to come on, as we're waiting on Phantom Dragon for a couple of seconds, but he joins now, and 3 lights, 4 lights, 5 lights, and we're underway for the British Grand Prix. And it looks like a pretty good initial launch, but then I get a bit of wheel spin in 3rd gear, and Pasti does manage to slip down my inside. Couldn't find enough traction to hold it around the outside there, as Pasti runs in quite deep heading into turn 3, but I was wiggling around myself a little bit as well, so couldn't really find the traction, as once again the car is definitely not looking very stable right now. But we do manage to come through unscathed. We still have our front wing intact, which is the main thing when you're doing a start. And Greeks behind had a really good start, up from P5 to P3, I think at a cost of position for Tash and Pedro respectively. And he's now looking to put a bit of pressure on me as well. So not the greatest start you've ever seen. Got a lot of wheel spin in 3rd gear, and Pasti just had the better start, so hopefully we'll try to settle into a bit of a rhythm now, and there will still be plenty of opportunities throughout this race to get this position back again from Pasti. And you can see I was struggling a little bit here in these high fuel, full wet conditions. Greeks closing in on me a little bit, as I'm actually using quite a bit of DRS, so I extended the gap again. Now, I did a little bit of time trial in the wets, and basically what I noticed is that my dry setup actually felt really good in the wet somehow. And yeah, as you might have noticed before the race, I added 1 click of front wing, even though in time trial I thought 7.6 was the best setup to go with, but I felt like maybe with the high fuel it might be better to go for 8.6 rings rather than 7.6 wings. So, but you can see now, definitely making a couple of mistakes, especially in the final corner right there. Ran way too wide, and also here you can see Weeks is definitely closing up on me, as that was nearly a warning, and yeah, had some difficulties getting onto the power. But you can see now we're skipping a couple of laps, and we're going back to 7.6 wings when it's time for our next pit stop. Selecting the inters already, but I don't think we're anywhere near inters at the moment, although the track is drying a little bit. The rain is definitely easing off a little bit, but you can see now we're not making these mistakes into the final corner anymore, and I think we found a rhythm, as we're exactly 1/1000th of a second slower than Pasti on that lap. You can see now we're skipping on to lap 7 of the race, and initially Pasti managed to pull a bit of a gap. It went up to about 1.6, 1.7 seconds, but towards the end of the stint, as the tires get a bit warmer,
20 minutes, maybe more, light rain is here to stay.
As Jeff tells us that light rain is here to stay. Now, I wanted to hear the message that intermediate tires might be faster than wet tires. That's usually my call to come in, so I decided to stay out for another lap, as it still looks relatively wet. But what I was trying to say here, as the tires get a bit warmer, I felt like my setup was working a lot better than Pasti's setup, so I closed in quite a bit.
Light rain conditions for the foreseeable future. Inters and wets will probably have similar pace at the moment.
Alright, so inters and wets have similar pace at the moment. Let's come in, let's see what Pasti does. He also comes in, as Weeks on the previous lap had pitted, so he is attempting an undercut on both me and Pasti. So let's see where Weeks will come out in all of this, as we're now heading through the longest pit lane of the car, or at least the one where you lose the most time. And let's see where we come out. Pasti really confident on that pit exit. Crow with the fastest lap of the race. He also pitted. As you can see there, Weeks going down the inside of the Mercedes of Chawan, and he closed up a lot. I believe he was about 2 seconds behind maybe when he made that undercut, so he definitely found a second and a half, but it's just about not enough to make an undercut on me and Pasti work. And Pasti really already immediately pulled a full second, and you can see now, only like what, a lap and a half later, Pasti 1.5 seconds ahead. He does a 27.6, and that's literally half a second faster than what I was doing. And you can also see Greeks only 4 tenths behind, so I was kind of struggling at this phase of the race, I think. Now I did of course change my setup a little bit with 1 click lower wing, but yeah, Pasti was feeling really confident in these conditions, as I think a bit of a trend throughout this race occurred where he was really strong at the opening of new stints, where there would still be a lot of water for the tire, and as the track dries up I would get stronger and stronger again. And you can see that here, once again, only 8 thousandths of a second slower than Pasti, so seems like the crossover is starting to happen a little bit. As Jeff says, we only expect 10 more minutes of rain, so potentially towards the end of the race we may be able to go onto a set of slick tires, as I do make quite a mistake here, and Pasti I think gains about 3 tenths there, so that was not great. That was probably my most significant mistake of this race. As for now, skipping on to lap number 17, and you can see Weeks picking up the 3 second time penalty, and that was basically his race over. And I think also at this point he just gave up mentally on trying to push as hard as possible and trying to put me under pressure. So you'll see towards the end of the race him dropping off our rear diffuser quite a lot. And heading on to lap number 22 now, you can see we've closed the gap to Pasti quite a lot, as it's now exactly 1 second again. And you can also see we're definitely taking a lot more speed through these corners now, and I think I was getting more used to the setup. That was one part, but I was also pushing a lot more. I think at this point of the race I was saying phrases to myself like, come on, just keep pushing, and that was nearly a spin there. So you could definitely tell, you can definitely tell I was pushing a lot here, as I wanted to get this win. I personally didn't really care too much if I made a mistake and would lose second place to Greeks. I probably wouldn't make a mistake, which costs 18 seconds anyway, so I'll probably still be on the podium. So I wanted to push as hard as possible for this win and try to put Pasti under pressure. I knew my setup was working better in conditions where there would not be as much standing water on the track, as we actually passed the Mercedes there who went onto slicks.
Weather is looking good for now. Inters seem like the fastest tyre for now.
So the rain has stopped now at the end of lap 23, but Inters are still faster. And considering it's about 30 seconds to make a pit stop here, you would really need to find a lot of time if you were to go onto slicks. So I said to myself, 23 is the last lap I will pit, and Jeff was still saying Inters were faster. So we're going on intermediate tires right until the end of the race, as we're now on the penultimate lap of the race, and you can see now we're 7 tenths behind Pasti. This has been the closest we've been since the start of the race, and on this final lap we're trying to put as much pressure on him as possible. I think I'm also on 2 warnings at this stage of the race. I didn't know how many warnings Pasti was, but I believe he's also on 2 warnings, so really important for us both not to make a mistake and pick up another track limit invalidation. 7th gear going through here, get on the power as early as possible. Yes, Jeff, we know the car behind us dropped off significantly. We don't care about that too much at this point. Pasti running a bit deep, so we're trying to set up a wider exit here. And Pasti had a bit more rear wing, I think, so he just got on the power a little bit earlier there, as we're now picking up the slipstream, doing a little fake to the inside, maybe just put him a little bit more under pressure, make sure we appear in his mirrors and he sees our arrows behind, and I think it did work a little bit. I think he ran a little bit deep, and we're now only 4 tenths of a second behind, heading into Cop's corner and 7th gear going through here, trying to pick up the slipstream, and DRS has been enabled for the very first time this race, so we might actually get a chance heading into Stowe here, opening the DRS as early as possible, getting on the ERS as early as I dared, and we're going to close in now. Are we going to go down the inside? No, we're not, but I do outbrake myself a little bit here. My idea here was to stay as close to Pasti's rear diffuser as possible and go for a move into club, but unfortunately it was not meant to be. And I have to say, this was a race where me and Pasti were extremely close on pace the entire race, and well done to him. He deserved that victory today, as we're now watching Benkai and Pedro fighting into the final corners of this race. And to be honest, I think Benkai did outbrake himself a little bit there. He did bring that up to the stewards, but I'm not a steward to judge, I guess, so we'll leave that to the actual stewards. But he will also report, or bring up a steward's report to get rid of his 3-second time penalty, and he will still end up finishing P5 if he gets that removed. But as I said, very close on race pace with Pasti, and to be honest, I really enjoyed pushing as hard as I did there. I think we were both pushing extremely hard, and yeah, a well-deserved victory for Pasti today. Yeah, how am I going to say this without coming across as being arrogant or cocky, but I think I'm going to practice a bit less for AOR. Basically, jump on an hour before the race and just see what happens. I think that will be my strategy from now on. I'll focus more on practicing for PSGL, which I've just joined, and I think the PSGL season ends about 3 races earlier than the AOR season, so in case it does get really tight in the championship, I can still practice a lot more for the last 3 races. Leaving a like on this video is always appreciated if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you for the next video. Bye bye.